The Cardinals are on a roll, plus we have Week 9 sleeper hitters, 2-star pitchers, and much more up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Nola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosuzuka.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on May 19th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scotty Dubs, Scott White. Today on the show, let's take a closer look at the Nolan Gorman and Josh Lowe breakouts so far this season, starter sit questions, our Week 9 preview, and it was a smaller slate of games, so I do have some of your emails for later on in the podcast.
Whoa, emails on a podcast. Whoever heard of such a thing?
I am a slacker in that regard. Full transparency, obviously. Anyone who listens knows.
We just spend way too much time talking about the stuff that happened. It's not your fault.
I don't know how Adam used to do it.
I don't know either.
I
think we just have so much more information now that it's.
I think that's it too. Yeah. I mean, it's every night going through. It's not just box scores anymore, right? It's you're looking at Statcast data and pitch mix and velocity, and it's it takes a long time. And frankly, that's why we start as late as we do. But we'll save that for another day. Before we get started, please like this video and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Let's jump in.
Take a little whiff of that, big boy.
Yeah, take a whiff of that, big boy. That is legendary Cardinals broadcaster Mike Shannon, who actually passed away this year and definitely wanted to work his call into the mix. So I know a few people sent that call in, and I'm happy to play it because obviously very well deserving. Scott, you are up. Oh my goodness gracious.
All right. I want to talk about Nolan Gorman here. Yeah. Who had a 2-homer game. And I mean, he's been hitting home runs all season. He's up to 12 now. That makes him one of the most prolific home run hitters in the game this year. But what might be more notable is he was in the lineup against a lefty, and an ostensibly good lefty, Julio Urias. And not only was Nolan Gorman in the lineup against this lefty, he homered off this lefty, one of his 2 home runs. And it was actually his first hit of the year off a lefty. So, not many at-bats because he hasn't been playing against lefties much. But hopefully this earns him more opportunities against lefties because you look at his numbers and they're fantastic. And this is a regret I have, Nolan Gorman, because I liked him as kind of a post-type sleeper very early in my draft prep. We're talking about when I was first formulating my rankings in October, November. I thought Nolan Gorman, okay, huge disappointment as a rookie. I get it, but it's a young guy with a lot of power potential. This could be a nice bargain at second base. And there just seemed to be so little hype surrounding him. The Cardinals weren't talking him up at all. They had all this surplus of outfielders, especially with Jordan Walker in the mix. How are they going to get him in the lineup? I did not envision a scenario where he'd just be the full-time DH. And more recently, he's been playing a lot of second base again. He was starting.
He even started at third base in this game.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, Nolan Arenado is not going to sit much. I guess Arenado got a day at DH.
Yep.
But he's picked up third base eligibility this year, which only adds to the value. And, it would have been a great pick as a post-type sleeper because what's helped the power come through is he went from striking out a third of the time as a rookie to now a quarter of the time. Quarter of the time's fine if you have as much power as he does. There is still the issue of how he's going to fare against left-handers, how much he's going to play against them. But as I said, things are trending the right direction as far as that goes. And I think given that second base while it's pretty deep in interesting players, it's pretty light on like high end must start types, and Gorman might be emerging as one of the few there.
So far, that's exactly what Nolan Gorman has been, Scott, batting .295 with those 12 home runs, as you mentioned, an OPS just over 1,000 at this point in the season. He entered Thursday as the fifth-ranked second baseman in Roto, averaging 3.3 fantasy points per game. That's tied for 7th at second base in terms of fantasy points per game. And I think we're probably a little bit unfair to Gorman, Scott. You and I both have him ranked 16th in our second base rankings, and I mean, typically we don't talk about this. We don't kind of confer on, where you're ranking your players. All right, let's kind of have them in the same spot. Like we each individually do our rankings, and this is what we come up with. And look, if let's just say Miguel Vargas was doing what Nolan Gorman is doing right now, we would probably have him ranked as like a top 10 second baseman, right? So I think we do have those concerns about playing against lefties, but looking at the second base landscape, you can make an argument that Gorman could be ranked as high as 8th, ahead of Gleyber Torres and Tommy Edman and Nico Horner and Andres Jimenez and all those names. I guess why don't we, right? Why don't we have him ranked higher?
Well, because I've had playing time concerns largely, but I think what I'm saying is today's the day where I say, okay, it's time for me to stop worrying about that and just, I'm eyeballing it right now. Probably could move him all the way up to 10th. Second base has been one of the most difficult positions to adjust as I update it over the course of the season, because there is such a large group of players who have kind of excelled for stretches and then fallen off, and they have complicated histories that you don't want to dismiss the upside, like a Brandon Lowe, I'm thinking, or a Jorge Polanco. But, at this point, I would say I'm ready to take Gorman over all of them.
Yeah, I think so too, right? I was thinking about it earlier today, and I'm like, well, Nolan Gorman is doing what we want Brandon Lowe to do, right? And even better batting average than we've seen Brandon Lowe put up in the past. So, yeah, I think it's probably time to move him ahead of Lowe and probably some of those other names as well. Again, starting against the lefty, that's big news there for Nolan Gorman. Not just starting, but hitting that home run off of Julio Urias as well. I think we could say a lot of the same things about Josh Lowe, Scott. And frankly, we might be too low on Josh. He went 2 for 4 with a double and his 10th home run on Thursday. He has now led off 2 straight games. He has started 7 of the Rays' last 8 games. I think it was last week I had a mini rant about how, look, the Rays just need to play this guy because he has been so awesome. And guess what? They listened. He is now batting .306 with 10 homers, 7 steals, and an OPS just over 1,000 as well. Like Nolan Gorman, he's lowered the strikeout rate. Lots of similarities here, Scott. It's kind of a post-hype breakout. This was a big prospect last year. We know there was power and speed, a huge hole in the swing. He's kind of fixed that so far this year. The average exit velocity, 87.9 miles per hour. Not nearly as impressive as Nolan Gorman, but he taps into his high-end velocity often. And we see that in the max exit velocity, 113.3. That's in the 90th percentile this season for Josh Lowe. And his barrel rate, 14.6%. That's 86th percentile. He's really fast, 88th percentile sprint speed. So, Scott, we both have Josh Lowe ranked as our, again, we don't talk about this, but 44th ranked outfielder in head-to-head points and roto. And entering Thursday, he was the 16th best player, not just hitter, 16th best player in that format. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, I think we probably need to do the same thing with Josh Lowe and probably move him up the rankings as well.
Yeah, I think the playing time concerns for him are even more pronounced because it's the Rays and they just don't seem to give anybody everyday at bats. But he's now started 7 of the last 8 games, so it does seem like he's raised his standing in their own eyes. You mentioned, the hard hit rate and the max exit velocity was 90th percentile. The expected slug, so even though the average exit velocity is kind of low, the expected slug for Josh Lowe this year is 92nd percentile, 547. So it's StatCast suggests he is legitimately, a top power bat. Yeah, his current slug is like over 650 now. So I probably can't sustain quite this pace. And that's worth pointing out too, is okay, he's the 16th best outfielder while he's for as good as the data looks, he's still overperforming it. And there's going to be some amount of regression here. And where does he wind up? Not quite an everyday player. It's going to be lower than 16th, I would imagine. But he does bring an element of speed here. And, I think you could easily make the case for him inside the top 40. So to get him there, to get him inside the top 35, let's say, that's going to mean, for me, valuing him over Hunter Renfroe, Stephen Kwan, James Outman, who's kind of slowed down. He had a big homer on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. At some point this week, he had a big homer.
Yeah.
But he's kind of slowed down. I think that's fair. I mean, obviously, a big position like the outfield, there's a lot of manipulating you can do in a range of 10 to 12 players and wake up the next day and feel completely different about all of them.
Yep.
But yeah, I could probably get James Outman up closer to 30th than 45th where he is now.
That's exactly what I was looking at too, Scott. I've got Jared Kelenic at 33 and James Outman at 34. And it kind of feels like Josh Lowe should kind of be right in that range with those other breakout names as well. So I think that would push Josh Lowe up to around 32nd, 33rd in my rankings. And I think that's probably more fair for him. Kelenic, worth mentioning, he's kind of slowed down here in May as well. He's batting .241 with only 1 home run so far in the month. So both him and Outman, taking a little bit of a step back, and Josh Lowe just kind of keeping it going right now with the Tampa Bay Rays. Want to get back into the Cardinals, Scott, because it was not just Nolan Gorman who had a big game. The Cardinals are red hot right now. They are 9-2 in their last 11 games. They beat the Dodgers on Thursday 16-8. They hit 7 home runs total in that game. Wilson Contreras, the other name here, who went 2 for 5, had a double dong himself, added 6 RBI in the game. He's batting just .256. He's now only up to 5 home runs. But according to StatCast, he has been pretty unlucky. Batting .256, the XBA is .268. The slug right now is .429. The X slug is .465. A career-high 93.1 mile per hour average exit velocity for Wilson Contreras, career-high 51% hard hit rate, and a 10.4% barrel rate, which is right in line with his career. And that was before his big game on Thursday. So I think those numbers are only going to go up. And I think much better days are coming here for Wilson Contreras. I don't know that there's anything actionable, Scott, because it's going to be harder to try and buy low or acquire Contreras after this game. But I guess the point is, if you have him, I think much better days are coming for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I had trouble seeing him as any kind of disappointment, really. I mean, catcher is the sort of position where you don't have to be amazing to be really good. And he had been the 6th best catcher in points leagues even prior to this game.
Okay.
So I feel like he was just somebody you slotted in your catcher spot and didn't really worry about. And now with this 2-homer game, Wilson Contreras is on pace for about 20, which, usually he's between 20 and 25. So he seems right on pace again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he's totally fine. Everything you drafted him to be.
All right. Nolan Arenado went 1 for 4 with his 9th home run and has now homered in 6 of his last 7 games. And if you look at the overall numbers, they're basically right back on track. So just a reminder of how quickly things can flip. Obviously, not every hitter is capable of, homering that many times in a, 1 week span. But, these are proven commodities, and eventually I think most of them are going to come around. Anything here with Oscar Mercado's got a blast from the past. On the Guardians a couple of years ago, we thought there was some power and potentially some speed. He went 3 for 4 with 2 steals and 3 runs scored in this game. Seems like he was only starting because there was a lefty on the mound. I know the Cardinals have had a bunch of injuries to the outfield so far, but Mercado had 15 steals in the minors this year as well, 34 games played down there. Anything to see here with Oscar Mercado?
I don't think so. No. Well, he's just going to play a reserve role mostly, maybe occasionally starting against a lefty, like you say. But I don't see him having a shot at making a real impact in fantasy.
Well, who did the Cardinals do all this damage off of? We mentioned earlier, Julio Urias started this game. He only lasted 3 innings. He gave up 6 runs, 4 home runs allowed, and really did not have much working. Only 3 swinging strikes on 68 pitches. The slurve and the cutter were both down 1.3 miles per hour each in this start. Wasn't fooling anybody. And Scott, all of a sudden, 4.39 ERA. The whip is still very good, 1.16, but allowing more home runs this season. Any cause for concern with Julio Urias?
Yeah, so we were actually just kind of looking at that together here right before we started recording to see what's going on with him, because now, he'd already had a career worst home run rate. Now it's 2.3 per 9 innings, which is just laughably bad. So he's been
4 homers in 3 innings, Scott. That's going to jump that number up quite a bit.
Right. But it was 1.7 before then, 1.7 per 9, which is still terrible.
That's true.
And like I said, the worst of his career. And interestingly, he had his previous worst home run per 9 rate, Urias, came last year during the dead ball year, whatever we're going to call it in retrospect. So like it's kind of a continuation of a trend, but in terms of exit velocities, pretty normal. Strikeout rate, walk rate, pretty normal. Pitch selection, pretty normal.
He is throwing a new cutter this year, but I figured that would only be something that helps.
I mean, the cutter has given up, I don't know how many he gave up today, but entering the game, he'd given up 1 home run on it with a opponent's batting average of 148. So yeah, I don't think the cutter, throwing it less than 10% of the time, it's not a major pitch for him.
Yeah.
So I don't think that could be the cause of the issue. Yeah, I don't really know what it is. Maybe the fastball has been, a little less effective, but it has. He's given up harder contact on it. He's given up worse numbers on it. The spin rate's down 100 RPM. But the whiff rate is about the same as last year. So like I'm just to say, oh, the fastball is the problem. I'm assessing it on the result as opposed to the characteristics. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue to be that way. So I don't know. I don't see enough wrong here to think that there's that like Julio Urias is just collapsing and he's gonna go the way of Alek Manoah here for you. I don't think that's the case, but the home runs are worrisome. And, if it continues, if he allows more than 1 in his next start, then obviously the longer that goes on, the more concern it's going to raise.
Again, that is Julio Urias. Let's take our first break. When we return, I've got a bunch of other pitchers I want to ask you, Scott. Start or sit these guys for next week. Talk about what they did on Thursday. We'll do that right after this.
All eyes are on Italy
Absolutely astonishing.
as the race to qualify for Europe
Huge moment.
all comes down to the final match day.
It's a goal.
Stream every pivotal Serie A match live on Paramount Plus.
It's major time on the CBS, on the golf calendar, and the First Cut podcast has you covered with comprehensive coverage of the PGA Championship from Oak Hill Country Club in New York. Join Kyle Porter, Rick Gaiman, and the gang for daily recaps from Rochester as they follow the sports' top stars on their quest for the Wanamaker Trophy. Download and follow the First Cut podcast wherever you find this one. Let's get into a few pitchers here, Scott, and start or sit these guys for next week. We'll start off with Tyler Wells, who got a bunch of whiffs up against the Angels, 5 innings, 3 runs, 7 strikeouts to 1 walk. He did allow 2 home runs in this one. He can be prone to home runs. He gives up a lot of home runs, a lot of fly balls, rather.
A lot of fly balls, yeah.
Yeah, a decent amount of barrels, but he does limit walks. So, if those are solo homers, obviously they won't hurt you as much. But this is now back-to-back starts with 18-plus swinging strikes. He's up to 78% rostered, and he's at the Yankees next week. What do you think about Tyler Wells?
Well, I'd prefer to sit him at the Yankees because he is a fly ball pitcher who throws right-handed at Yankee Stadium. That just seems like, you're playing with fire there. Doesn't mean you have to start him. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to sit him, I should say. Just depends what your options are. But that would be my preference, sitting Wells. Even though the results weren't all good in this start, I thought it was encouraging overall for Wells. As you mentioned, swinging strikes have been way up now 2 starts in a row. And if he adds that to his game, and he's not just a control artist who limits hits on fly balls, I mean, that could really take his game to another level and create another way for him to succeed. And interestingly, Wells got the swinging strikes were pretty well divided among several pitches last time out. In this start, he got 7 whiffs on his fastball alone. So to get swinging strikes on your fastball like that, I mean, that's not something every pitcher is capable of doing. I think there are limits. Like I don't really see like an ace outcome for Tyler Wells. I think we're talking about him being, if he can continue as a whip specialist who gets strikeouts, it's sort of the same profile of Bailey Ober at that point, and somebody who maybe can be like a reliable number 3, number 4 starter for you in fantasy. That's what I think Tyler Wells is aspiring to. I mean, Tony Gonsolin, that would be a great comp for maybe what he could be if things continue down this path. So I'm encouraged by what Wells is doing.
All right. Taj Bradley had a solid return to the Rays rotation. He was at the Mets and went 5 innings, allowed 2 runs, 4 strikeouts, had 10 swinging strikes on 86 pitches. The velocity was up a little bit here. The cutter up 2 miles per hour, the curve up 1.7 miles per hour. And he did lower the cutter usage in this one. It was not particularly good, only 2 whiffs and a 14% CSW, but through more curves and changeups here for Taj Bradley. And through 4 starts, now has a 3.54 ERA and a .93 whip, up to 78% rostered, much like Tyler Wells got, and thrown right back into the fire next week, because if he sticks around, it's the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. What do you think about that for Taj Bradley?
Yeah, and he's supposed to stick around. Kevin Cash, when commenting on his promotion, said basically, hopefully he gets in a comfort zone and can become a reliable option for us. So he gave every indication. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he gave every indication that Bradley is here to stay, provided he pitches well enough to stay. And it got good results in his return. We weren't sure how it was going to go, obviously, because in 3 starts after being sent down, he had a 16 ERA. He had 1 more strikeout than home run allowed in those 3 starts after being sent to AAA. So he was just getting crushed, and it's almost like we have to evaluate him all over again now that he's back. So far, so good. Taj Bradley got good results. But I will point out that part of his issue after being sent down was control. And in this start, even with the good result, Taj Bradley threw only 59.3% of his pitches for strikes. That's really bad. When he was up in the majors previously, he threw 65.6% of his pitches for strikes, which is pretty good. So I don't know. I'm still unsure how this is going to play out for Bradley. I'm still in the stage where I'm evaluating him all over again. I feel uncomfortable with the idea of recommending him next week, but he is in line for 2 starts. And he's among my 10 sleeper pitchers for next week because of that.
All right. Again, tougher matchups there. The Blue Jays and the Dodgers. We'll see what Taj Bradley can put together. Yuri Perez, another young pitcher who picked up his first career win up against the Nationals. 5 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts to just 1 walk. Did a great job limiting hard contact, but only picked up 6 swinging strikes on 78 pitches in this one. Up to 87% rostered for Perez. And also some tough matchups next week in a 2-start week at the Rockies and at the Angels. What do you think about that for Yuri Perez?
Yeah, I'm probably going to start him. He's been good enough in his first 2 outings to just for me, he's the sort of pitcher who, when he's making 2 starts, it's automatic. Yes, the matchups are bad, but I think Yuri Perez is good. I would have liked to see more swinging strikes, as you pointed out, and he didn't have a ton. How many did he have in his first start? Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
I'll pull it up.
He had Yuri Perez in his first start. He had 16 on 88 pitches. No, so he had plenty in his first start, and then not so much here in the second start. But average exit velocity, 83.8 miles per hour. That's certainly good. He was allowing more contact, but it was weak contact on average, and had more than a strikeout per inning. So, like, there's just not a lot to complain about here, and obviously the upside is very high. So I think I roll with them in a 2-start week. If it was just 1 start at Colorado, probably not. But 2 starts, one of them being at Colorado, I think you got to do it.
All right, thumbs up there for Yuri Perez. Nestor Cortez turned in his first quality start in nearly a month. He was at the Blue Jays, 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts, with 12 swinging strikes on 91 pitches. Did obviously help that there was no Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in the lineup here. Did a great job limiting hard contact, but the ERA remains over 5. 1.28 whip for Nestor Cortez. Scott, do you start at home against the Orioles next week?
Yeah, I think I do. He needed a start like this. His last 4 starts, Nestor Cortez had an ERA of about 8.50. Interestingly, he threw his fastball a lot more in this start. Normally, he throws it about half the time. He threw it closer to 2/3 of the time, and it got 10 of his 12 whiffs. I mean, he's one of those pitchers who can get whiffs on his fastball, even though he doesn't throw particularly hard. So maybe just kind of simplifying things helped him return to the level we're used to seeing him perform at. And yeah, even though he has a tough matchup next week, I think Nestor Cortez is probably somebody you're going to want to start.
Jose Barrios turned in a quality start on the other side of that game. 6 2/3, 3 runs allowed, 8 strikeouts to 1 walk, had 13 swinging strikes on 96 pitches. Still did allow some hard contact, but clearly a strong performance for him. And over Barrios' last 7 starts, a 3.14 ERA, nearly a strikeout per inning, doing a good job limiting walks, getting ground balls. Scott, I assume we're good starting Barrios at Tampa Bay, at Minnesota next week.
Yeah, as a 2-start pitcher, I think probably you roll with him, unless you're just being really protective of your ERA in a roto league. Certainly in a points league, there's no doubt about it. And I'm still pretty uneasy about Barrios in general because he can tend to. Oh, you know what? His season-long average exit velocity is pretty good, actually. It's gotten a lot better. Wow. It wasn't good in this. Like, I feel like analyzing Jose Barrios start for start, it's like, good results, but 92 mile per hour average exit velocity. But somehow for the year, he's below 88 miles per hour. I don't know how that happens, but that's 71st percentile. So, yeah, I think you're right to trust in Jose Barrios again.
Barrios has a 6.67 ERA and 5 starts on the road this season, Scott. Would that maybe deter you from starting him? 2 starts next week, both on the road.
Nah. Be interested in seeing what the breakdown of that is, because obviously you're talking about a total of 4 starts. Just if one of them was a crooked number. Yeah, I mean, on his first start of the season at Kansas City, he gave up 8 earned runs. So that would skew the numbers. It looks like all 3. His only 3 bad starts were on the road.
Yep.
But he's also had a great start at Houston and a great start at Pittsburgh. So I think it's just happenstance that his road numbers are so bad.
All right. Some 2 waiver wire names that could be available. Logan T. Allen. We talk about him quite a bit. He's still only 61% rostered. He went 5 2/3, 1 run with 5 strikeouts at the White Sox, had 12 swinging strikes on 102 pitches. He's got a 3.04 ERA, but a 1.46 whip, getting well over a strikeout per inning. The walks are a touch high, and he's got a 3.63 BABIP. So that's really high for Logan Allen. Gives up some hard contact there. Again, 61% rostered up against the White Sox. And Tyler McGill turned in his second quality start of the season. Up against the Rays, tough matchup, impressive start, 6 innings, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts, and he's at the Cubs next week. Scott, any interest here in adding Logan T. Allen or Tyler McGill?
I'd be much more likely to use Allen than McGill, but I'm kind of at a standstill with Allen. I don't entirely trust him. I don't think he's must roster. I was forced to drop him in the podcast listeners league, which is a 12-team points league where you might, where generally you're talking about accumulating as much pitching as you can. I was willing to let Allen go. I think he's such an unconventional pitcher. Left-hander, doesn't throw particularly hard, but had great strikeout numbers in the minors. And we've already seen some inconsistency here in the majors. I think against the White Sox next week, you could do worse than that, but it wasn't good enough to put him on my 10 sleeper pitchers for next week either.
Okay. And it's 2 starts in a row against the same team, the same offense. And typically for young pitchers, I'm a little wary of, starting young guys against the same offense 2 starts in a row. The White Sox typically have been pretty good against lefties. This year, they're about middle of the pack. So I like Allen, but I'm with you. I don't think he's a must roster or a must start at this point. Want to fire up the worryometer, Scott, on Dylan Cease here. Worryometer Friday. He did have a quality start, but wasn't very impressive. 6 1/3, 3 runs allowed, only 1 walk. That's good for him, but only 3 strikeouts, only 7 swinging strikes, which was a season low. And this was against the Guardians lineup that did not have Jose Ramirez in the lineup. Still gave up 10 hard hits, 91.3 average exit velocity. The velocity was down 1 mile per hour on the fastball, 1.6 on the slider. And all of a sudden, a 4.78 ERA, a 1.39 whip. Where are you at on Dylan Cease? The worryometer, 1 to 10.
1 to 10. Well, I would put it somewhere in between Julio Urias at the low end and Shane Bieber higher. I guess worryometer for Cease, I'm going to go about 6.
I was going to say 5 or 6. Yeah.
Let's say Urias is a 3 and Bieber's a 7. I'll put Cease at 6. And a big part of it for me, and maybe this is related to the diminished velocity, is that, I noted I hadn't looked at his overall swinging strike rate, but I saw he had 7 on 91 pitches in this start. It's like, oh, that's pretty bad. For the season, entering this start, I'm not even counting this start. It's gone down from there. 12.2% swinging strike rate. Not terrible, like in a vacuum. But Dylan Cease is normally like 15%. There's a big difference between 15% and 12%. And because Dylan Cease gives up, well, certainly this year he's been giving up hard contact, but because he has major control issues, major strike throwing issues that he's always had, if he's not going to be an elite bat misser, I have a hard time seeing how he's good. And so it could change. I mean, it's still early enough that we don't know how Dylan Cease's season is going to play out, but I'm starting to get pretty concerned by the lack of whiffs there.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you think about it, he's nearly 4 walks per 9. The hard contact is way up. It's up 4 miles per hour from last year, 86.8 last season, 90.7. And that was entering Thursday. And then he allowed even more hard contact in this start, and he's not getting whiffs. So, putting the ball in play more is hard contact. And there's, runners on base because of the walk too. It's just a lot of things coming together in a bad way for Dylan Cease. So I am pretty worried myself. He's at Cleveland and at the Tigers next week. I think you've got to throw him out there against those offenses.
It's the 2 worst offenses in baseball. Yeah, I mean, if you can't start Cease, then
look. But if he comes out of that week with 2 rough starts again, it's all right. We're talking about lowering this guy in the rankings. He's maybe not a must-start pitcher. I don't think we're dropping him, but this is pretty concerning here for Dylan Cease. A few waiver wire hitters, Scott. Only 2 names that stood out here from Thursday. Austin Hayes went 3 for 4 with a double and 2 runs scored while leading off for the Orioles and quietly hitting .312 this season with an .859 OPS, 5 homers, 1 steal. The batted ball data is great for Austin Hayes. He's 88th percentile average exit velocity, 89th percentile in barrel rate, 73rd percentile in max exit velocity. He's 68% roster. Do you think that number should be higher for Austin Hayes?
Maybe. I don't think he's a big like points league play. Normally you're talking 3 outfielder leagues in points league. He's not a good plate discipline guy. So that eliminates 40% of leagues right there. Maybe not quite that many, but a lot of leagues. It eliminates a big percentage of leagues right off the bat. So I don't know that he needs to be rostered in that many more, maybe 70, 75%. I do think he is trending toward a career season here. He's not helped by playing half his games at Camden Yards as a right-handed hitter with power mostly to his pull side. I know his expected home run number is better than his actual home run number, as you'd expect. And so that kind of takes some of the wind out of the sails there. But yeah, I mean, I think Hayes will be a solid like number 4 outfielder in maybe number 5, between number 4 and 5 outfielder in roto leagues.
Okay. Comparing him to some of the most added outfielders, Scott, Christopher Morel. I think we'd both rather have Morel, right?
Yeah,
I would.
Yeah, there's definitely more upside for Morel. I think, speaking to the average listener, that there might be some like deep league context where I'd say, oh, you can't drop Hayes for Morel, but like Morel, you should have somebody else you can drop for Morel in that context.
How about Hayes versus Jake Fraley? I know you're a Fraley guy.
Yeah, I think I'd go Fraley just for the same thing, just pursuing upside.
Alex Kirilloff? I know you're a Kirilloff guy. These are all your guys.
Hayes is way more startable than Kirilloff right now. So if it's a situation of I have to start whichever I have, then I might go Hayes that way. But if it's just for a bench play, I think Kirilloff has more upside.
And a little sneak peek at your sleeper hitters, Scott, but Austin Hayes or Jorge Soler?
Soler, regardless of whether or not we're talking about the upcoming week.
Yeah, so we were breaking down Soler yesterday, and Chris Towers said, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give you a sneak peek of Scott's sleeper hitters. Obviously, they weren't out yet. We didn't know what they were. He's like, Jorge Soler is going to be the number 1 sleeper hitter for next week. 7 games going into Coors Field, too. I mean, it really does not get much better than that. The other name
it gets better.
Oh, all right.
There's reasons to like him even more than that.
Very nice. The other hitter I had written down here, I don't think there's much. Jeimer Candelario, 4 straight multi-hit games. Does this matter, Scott?
Well, the Nationals have good matchups this week, so I considered him among the sleeper hitters just because he's hot. But it's difficult to predict whether he'll remain hot over the weekend. So I ultimately left him out. But he was, if it was a top 15 sleeper hitters list instead of top 10, Candelario might have made it. But no, I don't think there's a lot of reason to think he's going to become a mainstay for you. I think he's just hot right now and is pretty blah overall.
Candelario, 15% rostered. I would say more of a deep league ad than anything for next week. Some news and notes. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was held out of the lineup for 2 straight because of right knee discomfort, but he did appear as a pinch hitter on Thursday. Tommy Edman was removed with lower abdomen soreness. Cardinals manager Oliver Marmol confirmed that Matthew Liberatore will remain in the rotation. He's up to 41% rostered. And Scott, do you have any thoughts on what Liberatore did on Wednesday?
I thought it was encouraging. There seemed to be a little, some of the reactions seemed like, oh, he's figured it out. He's amazing now. I thought, I don't know, maybe I've just spent too much time on Twitter with baseball nerds.
Stay off Twitter.
I thought some of the reactions were a little overblown. But it was encouraging. I think if nothing else, he earned a right to continue to take a turn for the Cardinals and to maybe even be picked up in a few leagues. I probably value him about on the same level as Logan Allen right now. Some questions remain, but I see the upside as well. I'm curious, though, who gets bumped from the rotation, because are they just going to go 6-man for a while?
That's what it seems like. I think that Steven Matz probably should get the boot, but it doesn't appear that will happen as of now.
Yeah.
Yep. Dustin May was officially placed on the IL with a right flexor pronator strain, and Dodgers manager Dave Roberts said that Gavin Stone makes the most sense to replace May in the starting rotation. Stone had 10 strikeouts in his most recent start in the minors. He's 32% rostered. Scott, would you rather add Gavin Stone or Matthew Liberatore?
Liberatore. Stone is, if the Dodgers don't rearrange their rotation, he would line up for 2 starts returning, but I can't. Like, it's as much as we've kind of the way Brandon Pfaadt has become sort of a punchline since he got called up. And I know his last start was better, and hopefully he continues to trend the right direction. But he came with a lot of hype and was just giving up a ton of home runs, getting shelled his first 2 or 3 outings there, and kind of became a punchline. I was far more discouraged by what I saw from Stone when he debuted on that same day Pfaadt did, because his changeup was supposed to be like a wipeout pitch, something major leaguers like would have a hard time hitting. And that wasn't what we saw at all. He got 1 whiff on it and he threw it a ton. So maybe he threw it too much. I don't know. It is encouraging that he went back to the minors and had some success, and hopefully, it's debuts are weird. Obviously, there are a lot of nerves, I'm sure, and just you have to learn. Some pitchers have to learn to attack hitters in a different way than they were in the minors, because it's a much higher level of competition, obviously. So I'm not trying to pronounce Stone's career dead here on the spot, but like, he showed me nothing to get excited about in his debut. So I'm going to take a wait and see approach with him now that he's returning.
All right. Liam Hendricks will throw live batting practice Friday, and if it goes well, is expected to be activated shortly thereafter. Starling Marte was out of the lineup Thursday due to soreness in his hand. He was hit by a pitch on Wednesday. And while on the Mets, one day after hitting a game-tying home run, Mark Vientos was not in the lineup, as we suspected on yesterday's podcast. Seth Lugo was placed on the IL with a left calf strain. Ryan Weathers was recalled from AAA. Jose Trevino was placed on the IL with a hamstring strain. Kyle Higashioka should start most games in his absence. Gary Sanchez will have his contract selected and promoted by the Mets on Friday. And I can't wait until he's taking playing time away from Francisco Alvarez, Scott.
Yep, I tweeted out. What did I tweet out? I can't remember it now. All the faults of Francisco Alvarez with none of the upside. And that's what the Mets are getting here with Gary Sanchez. And I'm very disappointed in it. Like, it's been all bad news since I moved Francisco Alvarez into my top 12 catchers. It's been all bad news for him because we got Omar Narvaez coming back soon. I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to shake out for him and for the Mets catcher situation. But I'd rather not see Gary Sanchez get mixed up in it.
You and me both, Scotty. The Angels will decide if Jared Walsh will be activated after Friday's game at AAA, and he's 22% roster, did have 29 home runs back in 2021. Scott, any deep league interest in Jared Walsh?
I mean, it depends how deep you're talking.
15-team roto leagues or deeper?
I couldn't fit him on my 15-team rosters, no.
Scotty. He's got those stacked rosters in the 15 teams.
I wish. It is funny to be in the bottom half of the standings and feel like you have nobody you can drop. That's a weird situation to find yourself in.
Some underperformance for sure. Orioles prospect Colton Cowser is dealing with left quad tightness, and he was scratched from the lineup on Wednesday. Some people thought he was getting called up, but it turned out just to be an injury. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we'll get into the Week 9 preview here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
In 3, 2, 1.
How you doing?
Run, Forrest!
Run, Ernie.
So fetch.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Big thanks to those watching us live here. It's past 1 a.m. on the East Coast and 519 people here, so we do appreciate you. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. The Week 9 preview, Scott, let's start with the schedule for next week. 14 teams have 7 games. 16 teams have 6 games. So that means 0 teams have to play 5 games next week. The Rockies. What's going on with the Rockies next week? They got 7 home games, 4 against the Marlins and 3 against the Mets.
First time all year, the Rockies have had a full week at
Wow.
Coors Field. Very exciting. And yet, I couldn't get them among my 5 best hitter matchups because the pitchers they're facing are so tough. That doesn't mean don't start your Rockies.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a conflict there between the pitchers and the locale.
That's pretty crazy, man. It's late May, and this is the first week coming up that they're going to have an entire homestand. That's
they haven't had a week yet where they're on the road the whole time either. It was always split home and away.
That is weird. Huh.
Yeah.
Anywho, starter sit these fringe 2-start pitchers. Kodai Senga is at the Cubs and at the Rockies.
Coming off that 13 strikeout effort, I think you pretty much have to start him.
Yeah, I think so too. Mackenzie Gore is going up against the Padres and the Royals.
Yeah, he's a pretty good source of strikeouts. I wish he wouldn't walk so many guys, but 2-start week against 2 bottom 6 offenses. Don't think the Padres are going to stay there, but they are there right now. Yeah, go for it.
Graham Ashcraft. Hope you listen to Scott and you sold high while you could. He is going up against the Cardinals and at the Cubs.
No, I'm pretty scared of him right now. Bottom 7 offenses, by the way, Royals and Padres. The Royals have been better.
Probably no Manny Machado in that Padres lineup either.
True. Yeah.
Brandon Williamson, the same matchups there, Scott. Home against the Reds and home against the Cardinals, rather, and at the Cubs.
Encouraging debut, but I need to see a lot more from Williamson, so it's a no from me.
And I assume it's going to be a no for Gavin Stone. If he's up, he's at the Braves and at the Rays. Yikes.
Correct.
All right, 2-star pitchers to add and stream for next week, Scott. You've got 2, 4, 6, 7 names on the list. Who are they?
Okay. Yeah, a lot of good 2-start options. Well, good's maybe stretching it a little bit, but obviously getting an extra start helps if you're talking about adding a pitcher off the waiver wire. My favorite for this week, barely makes the cut here as a sleeper pitcher, is Bailey Ober. Matchups are nothing special, Giants and Blue Jays, but he just had a good start against the Dodgers, so let's roll with it. I think Ober's a good pitcher. Dane Dunning at Pittsburgh, offense that's cooled off a lot. At Baltimore, pretty good offense, but a favorable venue, and Dunning continues to sport an ERA south of 2, so I'll run him out there for the 2 starts. A little scarier here with Taj Bradley, especially since he's going against the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, but he technically hasn't had a bad major league start yet, so let's go with it. Michael Lorenzen on a nice run. I don't think any of us really believe in it, but he's at KC and home against the White Sox this week, 2 offenses that rank in the bottom half of the league in runs scored. So I think he's a fine choice for this week. Kyle Bradish, opposite end of the spectrum here with these matchups, at the Yankees against the Rangers. So it really comes down to whether you're, obviously Bradish is coming off 2 good starts. Are you willing to roll the dice for that extra start, or would you rather play it safe with a 1-start guy? I can't answer that question for you, but I do have Bradish as my 8th best sleeper pitcher for this week. Mike Clevinger, much better matchups at Cleveland, at Detroit. Those are the 2 lowest scoring offenses in baseball so far, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Clevinger is not that good, but he may be good enough to take advantage of those matchups. This is the real scary one. This will really test how you feel about matchups and 2-start weeks, because Brady Singer, one of the hardest hit pitchers in baseball this year, but the results have been a little better lately. And he goes against the Tigers, worst offense in baseball, the Nationals, 5th worst offense in baseball. I don't think I'd do it, but if you're searching the waiver wire for streamable pitchers, then I guess he's an option to consider.
I feel like you could have just copy and pasted your analysis for Mike Clevenger and used that for Brady Singer because they're both pretty unimpressive pitchers, but the matchups are great for both of them. Single start streamers for next week, Scott. Who do you have?
I have Josiah Gray at Kansas City. Home runs haven't been his issue this year, but I kind of feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop as far as those go. But at Kansas City, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. It's a park that suppresses power pretty well. I'm going to say Jack Flaherty at Cleveland for now. Now, he is making a start over the weekend, and depending on how that goes, may change my mind. But if he picks up where he left off in his previous start, then I like him for that matchup against the Guardians. Reed Detmers against the Marlins. Obviously, that's a bad offense, so you could consider him.
All right, let's slide over to the hitters and the best matchups for next week. The Mariners, Marlins, Cardinals, White Sox, and Red Sox. The worst hitter matchups, Twins, Pirates, A's, Giants, and the Blue Jays. With that said, Scott, your sleeper hitters for week 9.
Well, you already spoiled, I should say, that Jorge Soler is my number one sleeper hitter for this week, just as he was last week. You mentioned also that the Marlins have the second best matchups, that they have a 4-game series at Coors Field. All reasons to like Jorge Soler. 4 of the pitchers on the schedule for the Marlins throw left-handed. Jorge Soler against left-handers this year, 367 with 6 home runs, a 1520 OPS. He has crushed them. So that's all the more reason to like Jorge Soler. I don't care what format you're in. You want him active for this week. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt over the weekend. Lars Nootbaar still qualifies for this, amazingly. I don't know why he's not rostered everywhere yet, but the Cardinals, you mentioned, have the third best matchup. Only one lefty on the schedule. I think he's a must. A couple Cubs here who have just been hitting well of late and happen to be rostered in less than 80% of leagues. Seiya Suzuki and, of course, Christopher Morel, who we've talked about a lot, but is still available enough to mention here. Their matchups are okay. So I think the fact they're hot counts for a lot here. Jarren Duran, you mentioned the Red Sox have the 5th best matchups. I think he's a pretty easy call given that context. Jake Berger, who is up to double-digit home runs, amazingly, and seems like he's got the DH job on lockdown, even now that Yohan Moncada's back for the White Sox. White Sox have the 4th best matchup, 7 games, going against the Guardians and Tigers rotations. And, they're missing Bieber and Bybee from the car. It's fun to say their names together, Bieber and Bybee. Just sounds like you're babbling, talking baby talk. I don't know. But they're getting all the bad parts of the Guardians rotation. So it's, really good matchups. Berger, hopefully he can continue to eat. Let's see. Okay, so I mentioned the Rockies have a full week of home games. Brenton Doyle's been hot. I think you can take advantage of that with him. And also, Elias Diaz, if you need a catcher, no Rocky hitter has better numbers at home this year than Elias Diaz. He's batting .373 with a .964 OPS there. So good time to use him. Nick Senzel. The Reds are scheduled to face 5 lefties this week in their 7 games. 5 lefties. And Nick Senzel against lefties this season, .467 is what he's batting. So good time to use him.
Scott, I have to commend you for your very subtle dad joke in there about Jake Berger. I don't even know if you realized that you said it.
No, I did. That was intentional. Pun intended.
That's pretty good. Hopefully Jake Berger continues to eat. Let's get it done. All right, so great job there. A quick question on Shohei Ohtani. I think I want to do this weekly and I guess just try and let everyone know which way we're leaning. Do you use him as a hitter or a pitcher? Next week, it looks like he has 1 start up against the Marlins. And he also has 6 home games against the Red Sox and Marlins as a hitter. So which way would you lean, Scott? It might depend on what you need for your team, but if you just had to say in general, Ohtani as a hitter or pitcher next week?
I would say lean hitter. But there's we're at a point now with him where you could go either way any week. I think if he's in line for 2 starts, that's the only time I'm for sure going to say pitcher. Generally, I'd lean hitter, but as you say, depends on needs.
All right. I did want to ask you about a few Marlins hitters that produced on Thursday here. And obviously, they have great matchups for next week. These are more deep league plays, but any interest in any of them? Gene Segura is down to 16% rostered. He has been dreadful this year. I dropped him in my NFBC main event league. And of course, that means he's having his best week yet, Scott. 7 hits, 2 RBI, and a stolen base for Gene Segura. Brian De La Cruz hit his 4th home run on Thursday. He's hitting the ball hard, but just not enough fly balls. So that's why we haven't really seen the power from Brian De La Cruz. And Xavier Edwards is an interesting name. He started in center field on Thursday. Seems like he might be filling in for Jazz Chisholm here. He went 2 for 3 with a double, a run, RBI, and his first career steal. He was a former top prospect in the Rays organization, came over to the Marlins, has no power, but a great batting average in the minors and a good amount of speed. Any interest in deeper leagues, Scott? Segura, DLC, I guess BDLC, and Xavier Edwards.
Yeah, I think Edwards, if you're talking an NL only Roto league, which I know you play in, Frank,
Yeah.
that might be where you look toward him. I do want to say with Brian De La Cruz here. So I mentioned Jorge Soler's numbers against left-handers, and the Marlins are facing 4, and they have the 4-game series at Colorado. Brian De La Cruz entered today batting .345 against left-handers, 10 for 29. So we're not talking a huge sample, but good numbers against left-handers. And obviously he benefits from the series at Coors Field too. So I talked about only 9 hitters just now. For that 10th spot, would you go with Brian De La Cruz or would you go with Lane Thomas? The Nationals have good hitter matchups as well. Not as good as the Marlins, but good. And Thomas has had a great month of May.
He has.
Who would be your choice there between those two?
I think
you do my job for me.
I think I would go with Brian De La Cruz. It's 4 games in Coors Field, those lefties on the schedule. It does not get better than that, honestly.
All right. I think I might change it. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a pretty good week for, last week I was wringing my hands over the sleeper hitters, as I often do. But this is a good week for them. I could go deeper than 10 for sure.
All right, let's wrap up with some bullpen updates. And we'll start with the Angels. Carlos Estevez entered the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up 2 hits and a walk, but did escape with his 10th save. For the Mets, David Robertson allowed a hit, but picked up his 8th save. For the Marlins, Dylan Floro walked 1, picked up his 4th save. That was his 3rd in the past 4 games. He's 36% rostered. If you do need saves out there, again, Dylan Floro. For the Guardians, Emmanuel Clase converted his league-leading 15th save. Nobody else in baseball has more than 11. And for the Yankees, basically everybody was unavailable except for Ron Marinaccio, who picked up his first save of the season. To stream or not to stream, let's start with Friday and trying to figure out who I said yesterday. I think Reed Detmer is up against the Twins, James Paxton at the Padres, and I think that was it. Those were the 2 that I liked. Anything else here for you?
I think, let me see if I like anyone else. Not really. I mean, if you were just really having to stretch, I'll say Matthew Boyd at Washington is my 3rd choice, but it's a stretch.
I thought for sure Cal Quantrill, Scott. You're 2 for 2 the past 2 weeks recommending him.
Well,
as starter.
Yeah, that's true. Let's go Quantrill instead.
Yeah.
Boyd would be the 4th choice.
On Saturday, I think it's even though it's a tougher matchup, Louis Varland, we continue to talk about him. You should just pick him up anyway, but if you're just looking to stream him, I think he's widely available still. And then scrolling up, there are some interesting names here. Brandon Pfaadt looked much better in his last start. At the Pirates, their offense has slowed down a lot. I think that's okay.
Yeah, that would probably be my 2nd choice, but I don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Alex Faedo very quietly had 13 swinging strikes in his last start. He's at the Nationals. That's more of a deep league play, but I actually started him in a 15-team league this week, so that's the only reason why I know about that. On Sunday, these names leave a lot to be desired, Scott, but I think Alex Wood at home against the Marlins is fine.
I don't think he's gone 5 innings in a start yet this year. Obviously, he spent some time on the IL, but
Yeah.
enough that I don't trust the Giants to give him much run. But there's nobody better here.
Michael Wacha's pitching well, but
the
Red
goes to Red
Sox.
Sox.
Revenge.
I think
game.
I'd go with him over Wood.
Revenge game.
It is a revenge game. I think I'd go with him over Wood, but it's not something. Again, it's really rare that I get excited about a pitcher in this segment. So these are all just kind of, you're forcing me to pick somebody, and so that's who I'm going to pick.
I am here to tell you that I am excited about Wacha and Wood on Sunday. Let's wrap up with some email questions here, Scott. This one's from Kyle from Northwest Arkansas. Yes, we play fantasy baseball here. This is a trade that I am proposing in a head-to-head categories league. I give Marcus Semien and Elias Diaz. I get Jose Altuve and JT Realmuto. I think if you could pull it off, yeah. Semien has been amazing. I don't want to undersell. Like he's
one of
the best players in fantasy this year.
Well, he's exceeded expectations, and that was, even though we were drafting him as, well, once Altuve went down, we were drafting Semien as the top second baseman, right? And he's exceeded those expectations. So, but Altuve was the one second baseman we were drafting ahead of Semien before he got hurt, and he's about to come back, and Realmuto is the top catcher. So I think you have to do it. I'm just trying to think of who Northwest Arkansas's team would be. So that's the Royals AA affiliate. Now Northwest Arkansas would be, I guess the Royals would be the closest team geographically to them too. So probably a bunch of Royals fans there, right?
This will surprise nobody, but geography, not really my thing, Scott. I can't really tell you much about Arkansas or what teams are kind of surrounding that area. So again, won't surprise anybody. This one's from Brian. Grade to trade 10-team categories league. Just traded away Nick Castellanos and Eduardo Rodriguez. Received Michael Harris and Lance Lynn.
Gotta be Royals fans. Yeah, that's the closest team geographically. Okay. So back to the email. Just traded away Castellanos and Rodriguez, received Michael Harris. Lance Lynn. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Michael Harris has got to get going soon. I know he had two, when the Braves played on Wednesday, he had 2 batted balls with an expected batting average of over 500, but he took an over on the day. So there are some encouraging signs there. Obviously, it's a smaller sample than anyone else because he missed so much time with injury. But I would still consider him the most valuable player in this deal, even though he's done nothing this year. And in a shallow league like a 10-teamer, pretty much always going to side with the deal that gets the best player.
I doubt that anybody in our live stream right now is from Arkansas, but if you are, let us know in the comments. Are you what team do you root for out there in Arkansas? This one's
specifically Northwest Arkansas.
True. From CJ. Need help on a Kokomo Friday. Head-to-head 6x6 categories league. Drop 1 for Nico Horner's return. Ezekiel Duran, Matt Mervis, or Brandon Lowe.
Drop 1. Okay, I would drop. I mean, I want to see what's going to happen with Duran here because Seager's first game back, Seager DH'd, and so Duran got to play shortstop still. And that's not going to be a long-term answer. Will Duran move to left field on an everyday basis? I think he's earned it.
Matt Mervis is off to a pretty bad start. He's batting .220 with 1 homer and a 37% strikeout rate.
Yeah, but I think he's the one I'd most likely hold on to of the 3. I'm leaning toward dropping Duran.
Yeah.
Either way.
I think so too. He's played very well, but of those 3 names, I think he's the one. From Zach, having a hard time figuring out who to drop in my 14-team 6x6 categories league. I have Altuve and Stanton about to come off the IL and need to drop 2 between them, Outman, Nootbaar, and Jarren Duran. I feel like no matter who I'm dropping, no matter what, I'm dropping quality players, but who do you feel has the highest upside rest of season?
Your format helps Nootbaar. Not that I'd want to drop Nootbaar anyway. So you can't drop Altuve or Stanton, I don't think. So it comes down to Outman and Duran. Here's the thing. I just noticed this today when I saw that Adam Duvall was hoping to come back when first eligible June 8th or something like that. So it's getting close. What happens when he comes back? Because the Red Sox outfield is currently Yoshida, obviously not coming out, Duran in center, and Alex Verdugo. And Justin Turner's hitting well as their DH.
That's true.
What happens? So
I'll tell you what happens, Scott. Tristan Casas optioned.
He's been hitting well in May.
Justin Turner plays first base.
Casas has been better in May. I mean, that's a possibility, but I wouldn't lean that way right now. Jarren Duran played a lot of second base early in his minor league career. I wonder if they would entertain that possibility. But I think, though I imagine he's going to keep playing for the Red Sox in some capacity. I don't know how they'll figure it out, but they'll figure it out as long as he doesn't slump here. Even so, I think Duran's the one I'd drop here. I think he has the lowest upside.
As much as I have been the Duran guy, I have him ranked the lowest of all those players. So I think that's probably it. He actually needs to drop 2 of these names.
Oh, darn it. Okay.
In a 14-team league, these players should not be free agents, man. Like, I think you should try and make a trade because, these players should not be free agents. There has to be somebody out there who's willing to trade for 1 or 2 of these names.
I mean, if you like, what could you get if you package Stanton, Outman, and Duran? Like, outfield is a position of need for a lot of people.
Something pretty good, I would imagine.
I don't know if that'd leave you two then in the outfield to do that, but yeah, you could get an ace or something probably in a 14-team league.
Even if you just do Outman and Duran and you kind of consolidate that way for 1 player, I think that's a pretty good package. So I would try and do that. But if you have to drop 1, I guess it would be Duran. This last one's from Steven. Dear Manny, Mo, and Jack.
Do you know who those are?
I had to look it up. I had no idea that is what their names were.
Yeah.
Those are
the Pet Boys.
Those are the Pet Boys, by the way. Yeah. I had drop questions for 2 leagues, both head-to-head categories. Drop Alex Cobb for Tanner Bybee. That is close.
I don't know why I was upset that you didn't know the Pet Boys. Like, why do I care?
Yeah. Oh man. I think this is a lot easier for you. You have Tanner Bybee at SP 51 and Cobb at 70.
Yeah, I don't have much faith in Cobb. That's easy. Drop Cobb for Bybee.
I have Cobb ranked 2 spots ahead of Bybee, but
drop Gray for Flaherty or Fott.
I think I would drop Cobb for Bybee, so I have to make that change in the ranks.
Why wouldn't you drop Gray for Bybee and then you keep Cobb? Are these different leagues?
Yeah, it says for 2 leagues, so yeah, I think it's different.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'd drop Cobb for Bybee, and I would drop Josiah Gray for Flaherty. I mean, as long as you're not counting on Gray for next week at Kansas City, I think, like, if you wait for ideally, you could wait for Flaherty to start this weekend and see if he has a strong follow-up. But if he does, then you may have lost your chance to get Flaherty.
Yeah,
somebody else will swoop in and take him. So I think I'd go ahead and drop Josiah Gray for Flaherty. And
Flaherty's upside is probably higher just because
definitely
of the team context. No, it definitely is. Yeah, I would make the swap, but Gray has pitched pretty well this year. But yeah, I would do that as well. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.